All right, welcome everyone to Torah Studies, Parshas Boy. In this Parsha we read about the last three plagues that were given to the Egyptians as we were ready to go and leave Egypt, and with the famous story and coming out of Mitzrayim and receiving the Torah. And the topic today, we're discussing tomorrow's question, today's answer. Passing the torch of faith to the next generation. And that's what Passover is all about, that we celebrate and to pass the story, to pass the torch to the next generation. So last week I came back from Australia on the plane, sitting right next to me on the flight, the leg from Melbourne to San Francisco, like a 14-and-a-half-hour flight, sitting crammed in the economy class. Right next to me was sitting a young man, a college student. He was there. He came to Australia with his class, with his professor, to whatever. He's studying the psychology of animals. Anyway, and I tried to talk to him. The first thing I tried to figure out, he's Jewish and this. His name is Eli. And I asked him where he's coming. He told me why he came to Australia, and I told him I came to Australia for the bris of my grandson. So one way of asking him to find out if he's Jewish, I'd ask him, do you know what is a bris? He says, yes, I'm Jewish. So anyway, long story short, and I was very happy to hear, sitting a Jew next to me. Now I have a mission on my hands. So if I would think that I can relax for the flight, not that you can relax much on the economy class seat from Australia, but anyway, I tried to start a conversation with him told him about tefillin, and he says, no, I don't. He had his tefillin as bar mitzvah, but he doesn't practice this anymore. And so I turned throughout the flight. I tried to get him involved, to get him somehow connecting, to talk to him about Yiddishkeit. And I ended up asking him. He speaks about his travels. So I asked him about where did he travel, what places. And turns out, as a child, he was in Israel with his parents. They took him to Israel, and that's what I used, and to get him involved and talk about Israel, talk about this. I was trying to find something that I can have some common language, because this is really something that is today's generation, to find a common language to our children, especially when we have such a gap between generations. It is a challenge in many cases. And here we read in this week's Torah portion about the famous instructions in the Torah about the four children. We have the four children that we guide, the four children that the four sons of the Haggadah. They ask the questions: if he's the wise one, is the simpleton. They ask the question, they want to know, what is it? And from this, we're going to focus first on the simpleton that the Torah talks to when your child will ask you the question. And the Torah says, when the child will ask you tomorrow, what is it? What is it that you're doing? And Rashi explains, what does it mean that the child will ask you tomorrow? So the Rebbe will guide us, will teach us that Rashi really brings out something very profound. that when the child asks tomorrow, what does it mean tomorrow? There is different types of tomorrow, different meanings of what tomorrow is. There is a tomorrow in time, and there is the tomorrow in, we call it the immediate tomorrow, as we'll soon explain. This, the Rebbe guides us to show us what we need to do with our children. So let's begin. It's going to, as we did in the previous weeks, it's going to begin with some understanding in the meaning of the Rashi, and then it leads to the message what Rashi is teaching us. So let's see inside. There we go. So here the Torah says, "V'haya ki sholcha bincha machal leima mazais," and it will be tomorrow when your son will ask, "What is it?" And Rashi explains what does it mean your son will ask tomorrow. Rashi says as follows. Ki sholcha bincha machal, says Rashi, tomorrow when your son will ask, he quotes from the verse in the Torah. It says there is an immediate tomorrow and a tomorrow in the distant future. Tomorrow in this passage refers to the distant future. We're talking about a distant future. Tomorrow, your son will ask, what is this? And Rashi goes on to bring an example. He says, similarly, tomorrow, your children will tell our children, that is a quote from Joshua, in the story about the descendants of Gad and Reuven. Okay, so what is Rashi telling us? Rashi explains, why does it say, what does it mean? The Torah says, your child will tell you tomorrow. He'll ask you tomorrow, what is this? So it says tomorrow doesn't mean necessarily tomorrow, like today and tomorrow, but tomorrow could be in the distant future. But the Rebbe tells us that there must be something deeper here that Rashi is trying to tell us. Why? As you remember, we spoke many times. There is rules of what Rashi is coming to teach us. If Rashi has a problem, he's basically teaching us, is explaining the Torah to the 5-year-old. So here, Rashi wants to explain that tomorrow is not literally tomorrow, but it means in the distant future. Then why does Rashi have to tell us that there is a tomorrow that is an immediate tomorrow? Obviously, we all know that tomorrow is the immediate tomorrow. Why does Rashi have to tell us that? Talk about tomorrow, the distant future. I understand that here we're talking about not the immediate tomorrow, but tomorrow in the distant future. That when the child, in the distant future, your children are going to ask, what is this all about? What are we doing here? Another question also, why do we need to bring an example from the story about in Joshua? Joshua is the book, not part of the 5 books of Moses. We have tomorrow's example in the 5 books of Moses also. So this, the Rebbe says, obviously, there is something here in Rashi that we need to understand. It gives us an explanation on the whole verse. What is the message that the verse is telling us? So before explaining why Rashi talks about this, why he explains what about the immediate tomorrow, we need to understand, first of all, what does it mean, the immediate tomorrow? So the way I understood this until now, before the Rebbe's explanation, the way we understand it in the simple meaning, is that there is a tomorrow, the sun rises, sun sets, that's tomorrow. And that's immediate tomorrow. And there is a tomorrow in the distant future. But the Rebbe tells us no. When we're talking about the immediate tomorrow, we're talking literally immediate tomorrow. In other words, tomorrow does not necessarily mean, in Hebrew, does not necessarily mean that a day has to pass. Tomorrow is the moment after this moment. And it doesn't mean in time, but it means the event that happens after the immediate event. What do I mean? Rabbi David Kimchi explains the day that comes after the day you are in. So that is how he explains tomorrow. In Hebrew, how do you say tomorrow in Hebrew? Is machar. Machar is tomorrow. The word machar comes from the word me'achar. Me'achar means, the word is achar. Achar means after. We say after what is happening now. So anything that is after the present is tomorrow. Me'achar means from after. So from after the present moment, you already live in the tomorrow. So just to give an example, let's say, you have a child or a sibling that is very much into football, and his favorite team wins the Super Bowl. So he's sitting on the couch watching the Super Bowl, and this is something that built up in him for many weeks, excitement, and his team made a final touchdown and they won the game. And he is excited and he comes over to you. And you're in the middle sitting on the couch, sitting there in the den, and you're reading a book, and your child comes over to you and says, "Hey, my team won, the Giants won the Super Bowl." And you hear and say, "Wow, amazing. Wow, this is amazing, beautiful." And you continue to read. For you, if you're not such a passionate fan of this team, this event already passed. You go back to your book. Back to your, yes, you heard about the event, you heard about the football team, they won the game, and exciting, very nice, but you moved on. But that child that is very excited about it, he's not going to move on from this. He's going to live with this event for the next week or two. So he's still in that event. So he's saying that tomorrow, the immediate future, we're talking about when you move away mentally from the event. And this is what Rashi is telling us, is that when the Torah says that your child will ask you tomorrow, it could be the child that has the immediate future. There is the immediate tomorrow. And there is the future, the tomorrow that is a distant future. So it could be the immediate tomorrow, immediate future that may lead also that the distant future moved you away from the current events. Is that understood? So Machar refers not to the day after today, but to a moment after this one. That's what Rashi is telling. And this is really a innovation in understanding what Rashi is telling us. When we're talking about Machar, Rashi is telling us, no, there is Machar. The Torah is telling us there will be the distant future, in the future generations, that the child moved away and he doesn't live in this current event because he moved away also from the immediate future. In the Rebbe's words, here says the Rebbe, let us preface our explanation by elaborating on something we explained several times about Rashi's approach to his commentary on the Torah. Rashi always opts for clear language that can be readily understood without examining the sources from which he draws his language. Even students who can only grasp a word's most straightforward meaning, that's what Rashi is explaining. As our sages of blessed memory described it, the 5-year-old who studies the Torah should also be able to understand Rashi. So that is the basic rule. We need Rashi is talking to the simple explanation, the meaning of simple meaning. This means that when Rashi quotes a phrase from our sages, he intends it to be understood in the simplest way possible. This is true even if our sages intended the phrase in a specific way, but that's not what Rashi is bringing it up. He's talking about the simplest understanding of the phrase. So this applies to our situation. When Rashi writes, there is an immediate tomorrow, what does it mean? It means that the word immediate, it means the word immediate in the most basic way. This means that tomorrow does not refer to the day after today, but the moment after the current event concludes. It is immediate, it is still today, but since it comes after the present event concludes, it is considered tomorrow. So, and this is true. When we experience events in our lives, when you learn people who lived in the previous generation teach the children about D-Day. They know that D-Day was on June 6th. You know that the Allies landed in Normandy in 1944. So you can ask anyone, any child that grows up in a family that what is D-Day, he will tell you. He lived with this. His father told him. But ask, for example, anybody what happened in March 15, 44 BCE. If you're a historian, then you would know that this is the day that Julius Caesar was assassinated on the steps of the Roman Senate. But most of us don't know that. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't mean anything to us. And here's what Rashi is telling us, that one of the Torah's instructions is to make sure that when it comes to tomorrow, the child should know this. We should teach the children that he makes sure to tell us. The Torah uses that word tomorrow, and Rashi explains what this tomorrow means. And obviously, in our case, we cannot explain that tomorrow means literally tomorrow. So it is impossible to suppose that the word tomorrow refers to an immediate tomorrow, since the sun from that time would have seen and known about the Exodus, the plagues, and the dough that didn't rise, rather tomorrow must refer to a day in the distant future. And that's what the Rebbe tells us. So we got the understanding that there is the distant tomorrow and there's the immediate tomorrow. The distant tomorrow occurs because time passes, and the immediate tomorrow arises because we become indifferent to the present. Now, why do we become indifferent? Could be many reasons. A lack of education, lack of having the proper way of giving over to your children. And as the Rebbe explains, Rashi begins his comment with the word, there is a tomorrow that is immediate, demonstrating that tomorrow is not a measure of time, but a unit of time cut off from the past. This allows for tomorrow to begin on the same day. And it is called tomorrow because it comes after the present event has concluded. Now, once this is established, we can understand that tomorrow in the distant future is not just a future day, but an era from which the present is completely cut off. This, we go back now to the story of the reason why Rashi brings an example. We asked why does Rashi bring the example of the story of Joshua with the children of the sons of Gad and Reuven. What are we talking about? There, the story goes, some of you are familiar with that and some are not. We know when the Jewish people came they entered the land of Israel, there was this tribe of Gad that the tribe of Gad and Reuven and the half of tribe of Manasseh. They came to Moshe Rabbeinu and they came to Moses and they asked him, we have so much cattle, we want to stay on the East Bank. You're familiar with the West Bank, right? There's the East Bank and there's the West Bank. We call it, of course, Judea and Samaria. But it's the East Bank of the Jordan River. And they preferred to stay with their cattle. There was a lot of the feed for the cattle there. There's plenty there. And Moses made a condition with them. And he told them, you want this piece of the land over here? Fine. But whatever, I'm making the long story short, he told them he basically was upset with them. He said, you're going to discourage the people of Israel, the Jews to come into Israel, just like your ancestors did. And they said, what we're going to do, we're not going to avoid going to fight to conquer the land. We are going to be actually in front of everyone. We're going to fight and we're going to help conquer. And only then we're going to go back to our families back in the East Bank. And Moses agreed. So they ended up living in the East Bank, where today is Jordan, part of Syria. And that's where they was. This was, by the way, part of the Promised Land. But this was part of the Promised Land in the future. Mashiach comes. But this was not part of the 7 nations. God promised Abraham he can have the land of the 10 nations. And that was part of it. But in any case, so after a while, they came in, they did what they did. It took them 14 years to conquer and divide the lands. And many years later, they started building up an altar. They built an altar right there by the border. And the Jewish people were very upset with that. They thought, now they're building an altar instead of bringing, you're not allowed to bring offerings to God except in the holy temple. And they thought that they're doing it to bring offerings in their places. So they explained to them, no, that this was not the reason why we built the altar. We build the altars so that tomorrow your children will not come to our children and tell them that you're disconnected, you have a different God. The altar was there as a reminder for us that we belong to, we need to bring the offerings. Where do we bring the offerings? Of course, in the Holy Temple. But that altar is a reminder that your children should remember our children, that we're not a separate nation, basically. Let's see inside from the book of Joshua, the way they said it. So it says, then the children of Reuben, the children of God, and the half tribe of Manasseh answered and spoke to the heads of the thousands of Israel. With the heads, the leaders of the tribes, they all came to discuss it with them. And they said to them, the God of all gods is our God. The God of all gods is our God. He knows, and Israel must know, that if these monuments were built in rebellion or transgression, we deserve not to be saved on this day. Let God himself punish us if we build an altar to turn from God, or to offer upon it burnt offering, meal offerings, or peace offerings. And had we not built this, so they explain why would they build it. They said, had we not built this, we would be afraid that tomorrow your children might say to our children, what have you to do with the God of Israel? After all, God has placed the Jordan as a boundary between us. So you, children of Reuben and God, have no part of God. This way, your children might cause our children to cease fearing God. Therefore, we said, let us build an altar for ourselves, not for burnt offering or sacrifice. Rather, it is a witness between us and you, and the generations that will come after us, a reminder to worship God with our burnt offerings, sacrifice, and peace offerings. This way, tomorrow, your children will not tell our children, you have no part in the God of Israel. Therefore, we said to ourselves, if you speak this way to our descendants or us tomorrow, we and our children will say, behold, the replica of God's altar our fathers made, not for burnt offerings or sacrifice, but as a witness between you and us. Far be it from us to rebel or turn from God by building an altar for ourselves, for burnt offerings, meal offerings, or peace offerings, besides the altar of God, our God, before his temple, before his tabernacle. So that is what the children of God and the children of Reuben are saying to the representatives of the tribe, the leaders of the tribes of Israel, telling them that we are doing this as a reminder. Why? Because tomorrow your children are not going to tell our children that we have nothing to do with God, that we are separated. So Rashi brings this example about explaining what is tomorrow. Because obviously there we're talking about the future generations. Because the first generation, they all knew what the people of God did to them. Those fearless warriors, they went in front, especially the children of God, and they went in front in the battlefield, and they conquered, and they took over. They took over step after step, nation after nation, and until they were able to conquer the entire Israel. So that generation knew, and they looked up to them. They knew that those are their heroes, those are their brothers. But what happened tomorrow, the future generations, when that all this will be the children will not be aware of that. So that is what Rashi is using this example to teach us about what the Torah instructs us here about what will happen when your child tomorrow will come to you. And he says there is the tomorrow, the immediate tomorrow. That is what the indifference that can cause throughout the generations, that time contributes to it, and of course, circumstances can contribute to it. The Rebbe says that this is obviously the lesson what we learn from here. The concern that the Torah has about our children tomorrow, right then when we came out of Egypt, the Torah knows exactly the situation and knows what will happen, and knows that Hashem knows that for us to be able to carry on and to carry on with the traditions, to carry the torch from generation to generation, we must turn to our children and deliver the message. But how to deliver the message? Not necessarily with rational explanations. After all, children, they turned away. And of course, rational comes along. You need to have the rational explanation, but this is the main focus is you have to have the feelings, you have to have the heart, you have to have the emotions. When you live with something and you deliver this to your children, with by Aaron Wexler, he writes about the 4 children in the Haggadah, and he describes how these 4 children takes about the picture of the 4 children in the generation, the people, the Jews that came from Europe, came to America, and how this. So let's read this. It's not a long reading. It says, "For me, the 4 sons represent the 4 generations of American Jewry. The first generation is embodied by the wise son, the Chacham. The wise son acquires his wisdom through long hours of studying Torah in the best of Europe's yeshivas before the Holocaust. But alas, the pogroms and the persecutions were too much for him to bear. So he fled Europe for the golden Medina, America, the golden country." They called it the golden Medina. They called it also the Treife Medina, the non-kosher country. Back then, came to America. There was lack of the proper Jewish infrastructure, education, environment. Everything was not conducive to raise a Jewish family. So he goes on and says, what is the second child, the wicked son, the Rasha? The Rasha follows the wise son. He's born in America. He was embarrassed by his wise father and his old world ways. He was embarrassed by his father's Yiddish accent and the Judaism that he represented. So the Rasha rebelled against it, all in his attempt to assimilate and distance himself from his dad. He traded his kichel for apple pie and his yarmulke for a baseball hat, disdaining any connection to his past. So the Rasha's son is a Tam. The Tam is the simpleton. Okay? The simple son. Tami was raised by his wicked father. And again, I don't like so much the word wicked. Is not, after all, even, the Torah calls him the Rasha, but as we understand in Tanya, Rasha, it's called wicked, is a person that is listening to his Yetzer Hara, but that's not for a different day, for a different class. But his father, he's raised by his father, but he enjoyed a relationship with his wise grandfather. So although Tami received no Jewish education and never attended synagogue services, his grandfather pressured his father, the Rasha, to give him a bar mitzvah. Although the emphasis was more on the bar than the mitzvah, Tami at least knew he was Jewish and even attended a few Passover Seders that his grandfather led. Now, Tami's son is Ben She'eno Yodea Lish'ol, the son that does not know how to ask a question. He's the one who doesn't even know to ask. Ben was raised by his simple father Tam, and had the Rasha for a grandfather. The Rasha did not prevail upon Tam to make a bar mitzvah. And he certainly did not make a Passover Seder for his son and grandson to attend. Sadly, Ben barely knows that he is Jewish and doesn't even know what the questions are when it comes to exploring his heritage, should he choose to do so. So, this is a sad commentary about the disappearing Jewish people. But thankfully, Baruch Hashem, we live today in a generation that all of this is reversed. Like this, we see hundreds and thousands of Jews, young people, will come back. And they come, and they are only here, they only come because what the Rebbe introduced. What the Rebbe introduced, the idea to realize and recognize the fact, the mission that we have, says the Rebbe, that this is indicated in that very verse that we just read. That very verse that the Torah says, and that it will be when your son will ask you tomorrow. You have to approach your son, as a child, to realize that sometimes people ask questions, even the Rasha, even the one who is mocking. Why is he mocking it? He's mocking it because he never get the right answers. He was told lies, and he was raised in a certain way. He never got the right experience. As Maimonides says, those who feel compelled by the evil inclination to refrain from a mitzvah, from doing a mitzvah, or to transgress, to do something against the Torah, they really want to be part of the Jewish people. They want to do all the mitzvahs and avoid all transgressions. It is their evil inclination that compels them to do wrong. So when I was sitting in the plane and trying to get Ellie's attention, that college student, who is far, doesn't know anything. He's far from anything. And I was able to get to him through exploring what was Israel. He was very young when he went to Israel, but he says his father went there on birthright, his parents, and that's where they met. They met on birthright. And then they got married. The trip to Israel, after the trip to Israel. And I told him, you should go also on the birthright. And he was like listening to it. He has a girlfriend. I didn't even ask if she's Jewish or not. I suspect that she's not. I told him, maybe you go on birthright and you'll find your match over there. So every Jew has the same soul deep inside, even if the outer layers seem drastically different. So when we have that indifference, it is something that is not due to any fault of it. It's only in the outside. He says, I'm not religious. I don't want to put on tefillin. I did tell him, we're going to take off now. Right before takeoff, I told him, after he said he's not interested in anything, I told him, you know what? I'm going to say a prayer now. It took a while and it took off. We were sitting in the plane for a while. I'm going to say a prayer for a safe flight. I'm going to say the prayer and you say Amen. And he did. You could see that the inside of him tells him, yes, I want to be connected. I just don't know what it is, what it's all about. That is the Tam. Says the Rebbe, there is a tomorrow that comes in a distant future. This refers to the children wholly disconnected and disassociated from their parents, the parents' way of life. These children belong to a modern era that doesn't know Joseph. Like it says, Shelo Yoda es Yosef. They don't know Joseph. Who is Joseph? The king. The Rebbe says Joseph is, of course, also the name of the previous Rebbe, the leader of the generation. Their questions are not born merely from lack of knowledge. They are spawned by the fact that a lifestyle of Torah and scrupulous observance is new, foreign, and unappealing to them. Yet the Torah teaches that since they are our children, it is our responsibility and privilege to answer their questions and draw them in under the sheltering wings of the divine presence. Engaging with all types of Jewish children establishes a legion of God who will immediately merit the true and complete redemption. As in the days of our exodus from the land of Egypt, so will I show wonders, as it says in Micah, speedily and literally in our times. There's a story I read about Rabbi Shmuel Kaplan. And he's a shliach. I think in Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. So he was, after he got married, he went to Kollel. The Kollel is like a yeshiva, but you study there and you get paid a stipend. And the Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Chadakov, approached him and says that he has a mission for him from the Rebbe, and that he should take off from his learning as much time as needed to fulfill this mission. What was the mission? It says there was this young girl, 17-year-old teenager, that had problems, questions, issues, family, and she was in communication with the Rebbe, writing letters to the Rebbe. And his job was to be in touch with her. The Rebbe answered her questions. Talking about, I believe it was in the 60s. Back then, people wrote to the Rebbe would answer more often to people. And again, the Rebbe answered every letter she asked. She wrote to the Rebbe answered. It was long letters. And the Rebbe wanted him to sit down and explain to her what is the Rebbe answering. And he did it, and it took a long time. And then one day she wrote to the Rebbe a very long letter about all of her sufferings and pain and this. And the Rebbe, 2 hours later, I think, no, this was the next day, the Rebbe wrote back a letter. And the Rebbe wrote in the letter, "I feel your pain." And she wrote back to the Rebbe, and she writes to the Rebbe, "Rebbe, I don't believe you. How could you feel my pain? You're not going through this, what I'm going through." And then 2 hours later, the Rebbe wrote back to her. And the Rebbe writes to her that one day you're going to grow up. You're going to get married. You're going to have a child. And your child, the baby, is going to grow. And it's going to start, and one day it's going to start teething. And you're going to see the pain of the teething. And you're going to feel the pain of your child, even though you don't feel any pain yourself. This is how I feel your pain. And ever since then, the Rebbe wrote this to her. That was the turning point by her. And she realized, it says, there is someone who really cares, that the Rebbe really cares for her. She ended up, Baruch Hashem, coming with a nice nice ending. She turned around, and she got married, had children, Baruch Hashem, a nice family. Says the Rebbe, this is our message. That's what the Torah tells us. When you see the child that is asking the question, the child that is not asking the question, the child that comes tomorrow, the immediate tomorrow, because of the indifference, you must realize that this is bincha. It is our family. It is our child. You choose your friend, you don't choose your family. Family is our people. And then just like this guy in the flight. Could have been anybody there, and I could have sit and read my books and do what I need. But I felt right there sitting next to Mehila. And he's a Jew. I have to do something. I prayed to Hashem. And then at the end of the day, he didn't want to put on tefillin. But at the end of the flight, when it turned light, I said, I have an option. I can go outside in the airport and put on tefillin properly and daven. But I said, you know what? I want to put on tefillin right next to him, just to say the Shema. So I did. And I put on tefillin. I explained to him, you know what the tefillin is? I told him it is. What the tefillin, the meaning of the tefillin. And I said the Shema Israel, and I took off the tefillin. So again, maybe I could have done, I'm sure I could have done more. Fortunately, I was not successful to convince him to put on tefillin. But what I took from there is that the message is that you see someone, you gotta make sure you do your best. Be the one to transmit the message, and transmit it how? With feelings, with not always is it with there's different children, and you had to have different ways that you approach different children. Every child is different. There's one last reading I want to read from Rabbi Yossi Jacobson that he writes about this. So listen carefully to these words of the Haggadah. See, they contain four critical points. Number one, we are not dealing with one child. We have at our table four different types of youth. What works for one may not work for the other. Point number two, despite the differences, all of them are our beloved children. They are not strangers. They are our flesh and blood. None of them should ever be rejected. Number three, the Torah does not speak to one genre of children. Rather, it addresses all of them, containing life messages for each of the four children. If we can't find the words for each of them, it is because we are not accessing the full wisdom of Torah. Yeah, so we got to access more of the Torah to be able to address more. And finally, number four, the Torah message to each child is distinct. You can't speak the same word to two children. So, B'ezrat Hashem, we should all be able to perfect it ourselves and to deliver the message to all children of Israel. And together Hashem will take us out from this galus, from this final exile. As we see, according to all of the signs, the coming of Mashiach is imminent, and children are waking up. They're just waiting for us, that Hashem should have the immediate redemption with Mashiach. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi and Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi Cohen.
So, B'ezrat Hashem, also next week we're going to have a Shabbaton. Once again, we're going to have a week from this Friday. It's going to be the Yortzeit, the Yud Shvat, the Yortzeit of the previous Rebbe, and the day that the Rebbe became Rebbe. That's going to be a week from this Friday. So we'll send out the registration soon. We're going to have in the shul here.
Thank you.